Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips that will transform your marketing game? You are in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. At the end of the day, growth marketing works when companies connect to the right buyers. But how do you do that? And how can you scale that process? Today, I'm joined by Trinity Nguyen, VP of Marketing at UserGems, which helps revenue teams kiss their pipeline anxiety goodbye by turning job changes into new revenue. Welcome to the show, Trinity.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for having me.
Really excited to have you on the show today. I think this topic is really critical, like matching up the right buyers with the right solutions. And a lot of companies struggle with it. So I'm really excited to get your perspective. To get us started, can you tell us a little bit about why it's more important than ever for companies to identify the right buyers and to do so quickly?
I think in any time, not just today, it's important for us to identify the right buyer. Otherwise, it's just a lot of wasted resources and time to go after the wrong ones, right? And then nothing converts. But especially during this time, like this year, and especially in the SaaS market, it's a little bit more challenging this year compared to, like, say, 2021. So that means the pie is a little bit smaller. And by pie, I mean like the number of buyers that are in the market have the budget that can buy your products or services. So it's smaller. That means it's even more competitive than before. So it's even more critical today to know who is your best fit potential customer and why you matter to them, so that they care about your differentiator, like where you're strong at, because that will increase your chance of winning in this highly competitive, less demand in general in the market.
Totally. And why do you think it's so much more challenging today than maybe it was a couple of years ago? Obviously, I mean, you mentioned budgets briefly, like everybody's budgets are being cut, but why is it so much harder now than it was?
Well, I think it's the budget is definitely the number one thing. Interest rates increase, less growth. So that means there's less potential pipeline or revenue to be made, at least temporarily. So that means marketers have less budget to play with. That does not mean that they have lower revenue or pipeline goals. I was in the call a little bit earlier with sales assembly teams with a lot of different marketers. And I think people still have either the same pipeline or revenue goals, but less budget. So that makes things internally and externally a lot harder today.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing. Everyone is, kind of battling with fewer resources, people resources, budgets, and the same growth goals. And so they're looking at things that maybe they haven't had to look at before, spend that just always was there, and, maybe tools that they weren't maximizing that are getting cut. And so that budget is under a much more critical eye than it ever was before. And you mentioned too the competition in the marketplace. I mean, there's new solutions and services and technologies coming into the market all the time. So there's more shiny objects for people to explore and potentially try out and steal market share. So those two things combined, less money to spend and more options, make it a really, really competitive market right now. And targeting the wrong people is going to be a very frustrating endeavor.
Yeah. And to add into that, like for us in marketing, a lot of the tactics or strategy that worked before don't necessarily work today. I mean, like we as marketers, we say this all the time. Like I think every year we say something like that. But I think buyers' preferences and behaviors and buying process when money was basically free, like interest rate zero. It's very different with how buyers buy today, the size of the buying committee, what kind of like business case they have to make to the CFO now instead of like just spending the budget that is theirs. So a lot of things are changing on like how people buy, how much money available, and then also like competition. And we talk about like new vendors offering something at the low end, but you also need to think about like the incumbent. They also need to grow. So what can they they probably more focusing on like, hey, use us as a one-stop shop for all your needs, because it's just one vendor to deal with. So you also have that pressure from the incumbent as well, not just like the newcomer that is offering with low price.
Yeah, for sure. It's coming from all directions.
Yeah. Fun year, 2023.
Yeah, right? I know. I do hear really positive signs for the second half of the year. So
yeah, no, it's true. It seems like the sentiment is picking up, anecdotally speaking, in the market. So we'll make it out fine.
Exactly. We always come back. We bounce back.
Yeah.
So what are some of the steps that you recommend for companies to take to identify their ideal customer profile?
Yeah, I think the most common ways a lot of companies do is they look into their customer base and identify any kind of common thread among those companies. So usually you see kind of firmographics, the size of the company, the revenue, things like that. But then one thing that I start seeing like internally for us too is we're not just looking at who are the close ones. We also looking at the customers that have the longest lifetime value with us. And is there a difference between those? So when we do, as marketing, when we do ICP exercise, we usually work with sales leaders or our sales counterparts. And we tend to be biased toward what kind of companies help us close wins in terms of new business. But in the tough environment where churn is top of mind, it's actually more beneficial to also include your CS counterpart too, because they have insights about, yes, we close these accounts, but are they good accounts? Or are they going to churn a year from now? So that kind of input will also help strengthen your ICP profile to really go after the ones that you can close, but also will stick with you over like 2-3 years instead of churn within the first year.
That is so critical. I mean, just in general, the cross-functional collaboration, like these things cannot just be done in a single department. It cannot be defined by marketing and then distributed out, or defined by sales and then like it's got to be cross-functional. And I think your point about making sure that it's not going to churn in 12 months is so critical. And that is a really difficult space to be in, especially in the market that we're in right now. Because as a salesperson, when you want to sell new revenue and you have a quota and you have goals, it's okay to sell bad revenue, but making sure that it's going to renew in 12 months and beyond, or have a longer term deal is really critical, so that you're not selling into a leaky bucket. And I think it's a hard one to balance this when the market is tough.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think once we kind of remove our hat as the department leaders and just think of the business holistically, if you're selling a leaky bucket, then essentially you're just shifting the hard part of running a business to later, but it's still there. So there's a silver lining in this kind of environment where things are just so tough that it actually encourages the entire company to be okay with dealing with the hard thing now and moving it up front, so that we don't passing the challenges from pre-sales to post-sales. And I think it's actually healthier for the business in long term. It sounds a little bit like a pipe dream, but like at least internally within UserGems, that we emphasize a lot on the revenue alignment, because we know eventually it's the right thing to do for the business and it benefits every single team. Pragmatically speaking, yes, there are some cases where we would make an exception where we know this could be a risk, a churn risk. And we have an approval process where at least the CS leader, the CEO, and the sales leader agree that this is the sales that we want to make, understanding there's going to be challenges so that we put the right resources in place to support them to minimize that churn risk down the line as much as possible. So that's kind of like the middle ground. Like it's not like black and white. We do make exceptions, but I think at least having that kind of conversation cross-functionally between pre-sales and post-sales will benefit all teams at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally. That the alignment, the revenue alignment is the key to making that work, as opposed to later on saying, we sold this. I hope it works out, right?
Yeah. I mean, it hurts us in the end of the day. If your churn is bad, then your revenue goal, you would never hit it anyway. You make 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. So everyone feels the burn. Marketing too. So
Absolutely.
It's the same number.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between a company that's really aligned cross-functionally and one that maybe is operating in like silos that it will be that cycle if they're not communicating across teams. So critically important. And then back to the defining the ideal customer profile, you mentioned, there's, you're segmenting your current customer base and looking at them. Firmographics is one thing that you want to define. What are some of the other characteristics or traits that you look for in defining an ideal customer?
Yeah, something like firmographic can be like pretty broad. So you have like the typical industry, geo, like where they located, the stage of the business. So I think those are pretty standard. Like that most people, when's the last time they raise funding or any kind of like major news? So use those as the signals. But another thing that we didn't initially look into is what is their go-to-market motion, how they make money. There's so many types of businesses these days. So there's a sales-led, there's community-led, there's product-led, and each of them has its own challenges and priorities. And this is something that in hindsight, like 4 years ago, had I known, I would have baked that into our ICP criteria.
That's so interesting. And so as you go along, you evolve with the new information that you're learning. I mean, how often are you kind of evaluating that to say, oh, here's more criteria we should put in place, or does it just happen more organically?
I say like it's both. Usually, I think, but just a conversation we have with the SDR function, the sales team, the CS, we kind of organically start seeing some organic close ones that expand our ICP a little bit. That forces us kind of reevaluate every, I would say, like 2 quarters or so. But usually like once a year, then we would take a look at the ICP definition and see if we need to make any changes.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there are often a lot of, characteristics beyond the geography, and that makes it an ideal customer, that they have the particular problem that you're solving and they're looking to solve it. And so that could be that, maybe a product-led growth company in your example is a better fit for what you offer as opposed to somebody else, and helping to evolve that and define that over time is really important. I think a lot of companies do kind of stop short of the problem they're solving and focus more on the traits. What's the revenue of the business? But you could like you said, it can be very broad and maybe doesn't actually help you get to the buyer as narrowly as you could.
Yeah, and it's challenging for companies that have offering that I call kind of like a horizontal offering. Like any department can benefit from this. That makes narrowing down your ICP buyers a lot harder. Like it's great in terms of like how big is the TAM for the business, but from a day-to-day, like how to target them with the right message at the right time and get them in and enable the sales team to sell to each department or each vertical differently. That's a lot of operational lift. So like if your product is like very niche, very focused, that's great. That's easy to know who the ICP buyers. When horizontal, I've worked at companies where if you ask different department heads, they would give you a different ICP buyer. So there's a bit of that.
Yeah. That's probably an ICP that's not working the way it should if you've got different people thinking it's something different. But that horizontal product is definitely a challenge because you don't want to alienate the departments that could buy. But I've also seen it done really well where, I mean, one example that comes to mind for me is Gong. Gong has benefits across so many different departments and SaaS businesses, but they are very clearly selling to a sales leader or a revenue leader, right? And, in my previous role as the marketing leader, when we were buying Gong, I was like, why aren't they marketing this to me? Like, I could benefit from this. And they really narrowed down on their niche profile, knowing that there was benefits in other divisions, but that, doing that, I mean, I'll quote that, nailing the niche, right? Doing that one thing really well was all they needed to do. But when you're internal at a company and you want to be able to sell to all the people that could benefit, but you could make an argument for actually narrowing down on the one profile that's going to get the most benefit and is most likely to spend the money.
Which it's hard.
Like hard.
I'm 100% with you. Like nailing the niche. That's like 4 years ago, I would be like, yeah, there's no way. If you're like for everyone, then you're for nobody. So we know all that stuff. But like for example, for us, with an opportunities, if we have the right persona. Let me take a step back. So we have the concept we call the three musketeers. So these are the three persona that if they involved in an opportunity, then the win rate of that opportunity is extremely high compared to if we single thread. And for the longest time being in marketing, like when you're trying to communicate to three different persona, it's really, really challenging because like what kind of content are you going to write? How do you make sure that you stand out with that persona? So like for the last 4 years, I've been hoping that over time, as we interview our persona, like every year, every quarter, it will kind of like point us to the way to kind of like narrow down our persona. This is our niche. 4 years in, it's still the three musketeers. I don't know what to do. I think like every quarter I would talk to my content team lead. I was like, I'm sorry, I promise you, but it's still three personas. So we need to figure out how to make this work.
I love it. I love it. I know we want to simplify it and make it, you think that the more data you have, the clearer it will be and the easier it will get. But sometimes the data shows it just is what it is. You've got these three personas and you need to get all three in that deal. But knowing that is way more valuable than not. So I wanted to ask, like, how do you know when you've kind of nailed down the right ICP, like it's actually working? I mean, we talked a little bit before about churn. I mean, that could certainly be a part of it. But how do you know that you've gotten it?
That's a hard one. I think we get it to a certain degree, but it's like, if I said that we nail it, then I think that's just a little bit too boastful. I think we're always like trying to evolve and trying to learn and trying to keep up with buyers' preferences. For us, so with the three persona that we talk to, so sales, marketing, rev ops, we're trying to tailor our messaging, like say through the ads, through the SDR sequences, through how we demo our products throughout the sales process. We're trying to tailor to different persona, and the way that, at least from the marketing, the leading indicator for us is the kind of like engagement we have on the ads. Obviously, the number of hand raisers, so that one's straightforward, and we kind of look into does our shift of persona in our like demo request volume changes over time. If it changes, like say for example, it used to be like a lot of sales requesting demo, now it's marketing. What does that mean in terms of our messaging and catch up to that? But we kind of like keep an eye on that breakdown of from the ad engagement to the hand raisers, like demo requests, to the sales outreach sequences based on persona. If they kind of stay in the healthy range, then we know that we reach the right buyers, and our messaging of what the benefit that we offer resonate with them. So we just monitor those metrics.
Yeah. So making sure you're keeping on top of the funnel and your conversion rates are staying where they should be. And that makes a lot of sense.
Organically, look to like the post-sale side. So we do use a tool called, so we use Gong for all of our calls. We also use the software called Laudable. So it basically just captures organic, like we call it holy shit moments inbound calls with the CS or AEs. And we monitor that. It goes into our Slack, and we use that as a part of our customer advocacy program. But I also monitor that in terms of who are the people, what kind of persona is giving us like good customer quotes or like advocate for us. Because that kind of also give me another anecdote, whether our messaging and our product, it has the right product market fit with that persona.
For sure. Yeah. And actually helping to narrow down that segment beyond customer and to these evangelists, the people who like cannot live without your product, as opposed to, yes, the people that buy and the people that stick around. There's a difference between those two groups, and being able to call those out. What was the name of that piece of tech that you're using?
It's called Laudable.
Laudable. Love it. All right. We'll link out to it in the show notes. So, okay. Once you've kind of developed that ICP and it's working, obviously we should be in a place of continuous discovery and trying to evolve and get closer to the right person or group of people. But what are some of the strategies that work best to, know where they are, how to get in front of them and build a relationship, nurture them, and stay connected?
So I think getting in front of them for us, we're a little bit particular about the targeting from the ad standpoint. Like we were bootstrapped for a long time, so we very careful of how we spend, especially in the ad side. So to get in front of them, we're pretty heavy on the account-based program, and we do a lot of one-to-one targeting. So that's one way, and it's been the program we've been running for 4 years, and it's about 33% of our pipeline and revenue. So a lot of one-on-one targeting, because we want to make sure that it resonates, people see it, and they will convert, or at least click and learn more about UserGems. And then we also have obviously we run the typical paid social, paid media by persona. I think a lot of marketers do that. But then also during the sales process, we also run our ads kind of just nurturing the open opportunity account on the side, kind of like a soft nudge, because we know that if we get the 3 musketeers in, our sales team is going to win, have a higher chance of winning. So we're also nurturing the rest of the buying committee on the side as well. The goal is not to drive any kind of clicks, because our audience is pretty sophisticated. They don't want to be retargeting, but we start seeing that people actually engage with those ads. So we kind of trying to stay in front of them at all time. So we have a very defined list of our ICP accounts in Salesforce, and that becomes the basis of all of our targeting. We use our own tool to kind of populate all the buying committees for those accounts, and that's the basis of our targeting. We don't use a typical LinkedIn platform, because we want to know if someone comes in, we can open the Pandora box and say, did we target this person, and which campaign was that? So that's a lot of just activities, but that's how we trying to make sure that we stay on top of them and as relevant as possible. Trying to think what else. I think the other thing we're trying to do across marketing and sales is trying to be very human. And I know a lot of people say that, but it's really hard. Sometimes you have this value prop and messaging of your product and benefits. It's hard to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the prospect and get their psyche of what makes them tick. So we're trying to add some humor. A lot of our ads or social is pretty silly, because I think everyone is just tired with their pipeline anxiety all the time. So something a little bit lighthearted could stand out a bit more, and we see that it works. So we're just trying to stay as human as possible in the way that we reach out to our prospects and kind of nurture them through pre and post sales. And on the note of the being human part, so it's a bit of a shameless plug, but for us, everyone who ever in touch with UserGems is considered as a champion for us. So, and our product is we track people when they change their jobs so that we can reach out to them in the next company. And it's not so much about, hey, congrats on the new job, want to buy UserGems again. It's more of hey, congrats on your new job. We actually going to miss working with you, because we actually feel that way. And we're here in case you need any help. And we never ask for a sales in the first touch, ever, across any of our sales, CS, marketing touch points. We're just hey, we're here. kind of like how you stay in touch with your friends, even if they move to another city. And we know that buyers are smart enough to remember you. And then when we nurture later on, that gives us an advantage over like other vendors.
I think that's such a critical tactic right now is the job market is in flux. Like really people are moving roles so frequently between layoffs and great resignation. Like the last couple of years, the whole market has just been uprooted and everyone's in new roles. So being able to stay on top of where people are going, and the way that you used to be able to do that was just by being connected with them on LinkedIn and seeing that your network was moving on to new roles. And we still see that happening. But I'll say just from my own experience with going back to like industry conferences, there used to be that you knew everybody at the conferences. And when they started coming back after pandemic shutdown, it was like, wait a second, these are all new people. Everybody's in new roles. They're at new companies. And even the people that you know are not the same people. So being able to track them from as they move around and is like just such a benefit. And I love what you said about not selling on the first outreach and just reaching out and saying hello or trying to be helpful. Like it's a very underrated approach, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying it, screaming top of my lungs on the LinkedIn feed. It's like, please do not do that. Don't treat your best buyer or your best champions like just a transactional lead. You don't do that to your friends or your family when they move, for example. Yeah. So just trying to keep that in mind. I know it's hard because we all have numbers to hit, but it'll pay off in the long run. Just be a little bit patient and be understanding. Like just land in a new job. You just need to stay top of mind, be helpful. Once they kind of find their footing in the new organization, then they will remember you.
For sure. And I think one thing too, just to tie back in with the definition of ICP, even as people are moving jobs, or maybe you're just doing cold outreach, if you have your ICP defined, then you're not going to be reaching out and selling to people that are not your buyer.
Exactly.
Right? And I can't tell you how often I get outreach, whether it's on LinkedIn or an email, selling me something that I don't need. and I try to go back and say to people, I'm not your buyer. And, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm trying to help, right? Like do the research, who your ideal buyer is. So don't waste your time reaching out to someone who isn't. And even as people, if you're following people as they move different jobs, or if you're reaching out to new people, just knowing, hey, does the company that they're at right now still fit? Because it might not.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think we all experience that in our inboxes. Like I've seen people reaching out to me with my current email address, but referencing about my company in the past, like 2 companies ago. So that kind of like a little bit sloppy. Sometimes I see competitors emailing me and pitching a solution. I'm like, did you research the account at all?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that. Having said that, I'm sure there are a lot of like SDRs, AEs, marketers out there that just trying to do their best as well. So mistakes happen. It's all right.
Exactly. Everybody's just trying to do their jobs.
Yeah. No, I think it's just try your best, trying to be human. We make mistakes too, and when we get called, I'm like, sorry, it's an honest mistake, and people are very understanding. But please do not ask for a sales like the first time you reach out.
Yeah,
it's just too silly.
Totally. That patience is really important. And I mean, to that point, like if you are being patient and kind of doing the human thing and being helpful, like what are some common but maybe less obvious ways that you can identify like a customer who's actually ready to buy?
I mean, we already talked about following your buyers to new companies. I think this one is pretty straightforward. If you're in some kind of sales role, you've done this at some point or seen it happen when they move, like kind of like champions on the move or buyers on the move programs. But another aspect actually related to that we've seen a lot of companies doing it now, but it's not common yet, is people are so fixated on the buyers, like the decision maker in the deal. So they go for like the C-suite. And you and I, like we're in position and we have like teams. a lot of time now we delegate to our team to make the decision. So it's a lot of like the bottom up. So some like what we've seen with our customers is they also tracking the users, obviously the admin or power users, but also like just casual users. Like say if you were training services, like reach out to the people that you trained. So you never know, whether they in the kind of decision-making position now. B, they can also vouch for you. And a lot of leaders right now just want to make sure that if they buy a service or a tool, their team will actually adopt. And it's not just a waste of like resources and have to justify it to my CFO and CEO next year. So the bottom up will help you to make a case to the ultimate decision maker. So I think that's one. A second one is we actually tracking our close loss prospects. So a lot of time we kind of shy away from close loss because that's just, I don't know, bad experience or negative or whatnot. But we also track them because people don't buy, not just because they don't like your product or your sales process. Sometimes it's just bad timing or like bad fit with that company. But when they're at the new company, things could change. So I wouldn't shy away from that. And we've seen a lot of close one coming from just nurturing the close loss prospects that are now in the new organization.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. I think oftentimes you kind of move on, right? You'd say, okay, that they were not a buyer, right? So, but that doesn't mean they couldn't be. So yeah, kind of that nurturing. I think that word nurturing is so critical, and it's building a relationship. It's ongoing. It crosses over different roles and companies, and people buy from the people they know, the people they like, the people that are helpful to them and are going to help solve a problem. So, I have heard people say like, oh, we don't email our customers or whatever, because when they're ready to buy, they're going to come back. They'll let us know. And it's like, no, they're going to forget
Who
about you.
Who are these fortunate companies? Why would you let your revenue or pipeline goals dependent on it? If someone just feel like they wake up and remember you, like, I don't know about you, Jen. I have probably at least 27 or 37 different tools and services I'm using right now. I'm pretty sure I wake up most likely, probably less than 1%. I'm thinking about, haven't thought about that tool in 2 years. Maybe now it's time to check it out.
Right. Exactly. It's so important to stay top of mind, and, that balance of like doing the awareness work at the same time that you're doing the demand generation work is what's going to get you to fill that pipeline over time. And maybe they weren't ready to buy. Maybe they were closed loss the last time you spoke to them. But 6 months later, a year later, or a month later, that could change. And so it's important to continue to nurture them through that process.
Yeah, I actually talked to a head of demand for a pretty large organization, and she mentioned that for them, they would never be able to close in the first opportunity. It's pretty rare. For them, it's usually about 3 to 5 close loss that they actually close, and they see that trend. It's just kind of like, it's a large ACV horizontal type of product that needs like organizational buy-in. So managing that timing aspect and stakeholders, but once they kind of figure that out, then it shapes the strategy of how they generate pipeline, and they're okay with like just talking to buyers, even if it's bad timing, but then at least you gain another champion in a new department every time, knowing that by the third time they're going to close.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Those big, like, enterprise solutions like that require organizational. Oh my gosh, that's a big task, right? And you've got a lot of different personas that you need to appeal to. So not easy. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. This has been great. Really great to hear about how you're thinking about ideal customer profile, and also just about UserGems and kind of what you guys are doing. So everybody listening in, go check them out. Thanks, Trinity, for coming on today.
Thanks for having me and just listening to me nerding out. I hope it makes sense. It's a lot of different parts and pieces that's moving to make a pipe gen happen. So hats off to all the marketers and sales leaders out there.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for listening in today. I'm going to be back later this week with a solo episode. I'm going to recap the Quirks New York conference and talk about how to differentiate your messaging in a crowded room. We'll see you then.